guys? It's Phil the MMA Dude back with the Split Decision Podcast, episode number 111, here with my always brilliant co-host, the Fight Geek. Fight Geek, how you doing today, man?
Doing pretty good, man. Happy to be back talking fights with you. How you doing?
Doing well. All right, so folks, here's what we've got on tap today. First, it's the opening question for Fight Geek. After that, it's a recap and review of UFC Vegas 34, Cannonier versus Gastelum. After that, preview and picks for UFC Vegas 35, Barboza versus Chikadze. And then after that, we've got very quick preview of Tyron Woodley versus Jake Paul. Oh, yes. We will be covering that. Fight Geek demanded we cover it. He said specifically, Phil, I won't do the show unless you cover that boxing match. I said, okay, I wasn't planning to cover it, but I guess we will. So that's all him. And then after that, it's my favorite section, listener questions and more. But okay, so Fight Geek, let me start off the show with this question for you. This weekend we saw Jared Cannonier defeat Kelvin Gastelum by a unanimous decision at UFC Vegas 34 in the main event. Kelvin Gastelum has had a very tough strength of schedule, but he is now 1-5 in his last 6. So my question for you is simple. What do you do if you're Kelvin Gastelum's best friend or his coach or someone close to him? What advice do you give him? What does he do from here?
That's a really tough question, man. I'm not sure I have that answer because I don't think that 170 is a viable option for him based on the fact that he almost missed weight at 185 this weekend. And
I was going to say he barely made 185.
Yeah. And from all indications is that he was working incredibly hard and had a very good camp. You see in his cardio that he's not out of shape. So I just don't think cutting to 170 is the answer. So that just puts him at a disadvantage at 185. I mean, he's extremely competitive, but he's somewhat unable to dictate the terms at 185 versus more powerful, larger guys. So he's in a rock and a hard place. If I had to answer that question, getting out of his contract and going and fighting Gegard Mousasi in Bellator is probably the best career path for him at this point. Because I'm not sure what he's going to be able to do any different. And this is no disrespect to Kelvin because I'm a huge fan. Thought he actually had moments in that fight. And he's looked good in different parts of all of his losses. So
getting out of his contract won't be easy, by the way. It's worth noting.
Well, that is true because he's a former Ultimate Fighter winner, but he is 1-5, and we've seen people let go for a lot less. So if anything, he's the most elite gatekeeper that exists in the UFC, is kind of a rough way to put it, but I don't see him, cracking that top 5 based on the recent results. But with all of that said, he is only 29 years old and has shown improvements each time out. I thought he looked pretty good in different, aspects of the striking. Obviously he was throwing combinations where he would come in and kind of lead the dance a bit. I thought him leading the dance would, I guess that's where the very, very slight controversy that he may have, eked out that fight could come into play. But I think.
Wait, do you think that he won that? Because I don't. I thought it was a clear 3 rounds to 2 for Jared Cannonier.
The 2 knockdowns, obviously, were huge in the eyes of the judges, and rightfully so. But I think the first knockdown, if that never happens, I think Kelvin won that round. He hit the floor, got right back up, and I think he was the more active fighter for the remainder of the round and was actually backing Cannonier up.
Is this round – wait, which round are you discussing here?
I believe it's number 3.
Okay. The fight was – fight was nip and tuck.
I'm not making a case for Kelvin because he got dropped. But what I'm saying is it's not like he was getting washed in all of those rounds. Those were competitive rounds, and I think ultimately Kelvin lost the decision because the majority of his strikes were, being defended – and he was, I think, 0 for 7 on takedown defenses, or on takedown attempts. So, with that said, I wasn't incredibly impressed with Cannonier. This was a razor close performance, and he was just a little bigger and stronger and outlasted Kelvin here.
Sure, but it's Kelvin Gastelum, Fight Geek.
Well, yes, it is.
Robert Whittaker couldn't get Gastelum out of there, and he threw the kitchen sink at him for 25 minutes.
I have the ultimate respect for Kelvin Gastelum. It's not a shot at him at all, and I think it's an impressive win for Cannonier. But, let's not act like Kelvin got, washed out. If he doesn't get knocked down, I think there's a case that he wins that round, and then that changes the whole fight because it was a 48-47 fight anyway. So,
Okay. All right, very fair, very fair.
But it's a tough spot for Kelvin. I think his path to gold is a little stifled here, but, youth is on his side. The landscape can change in the next 3 or 4 years, and Kelvin is just, hitting 33 years old and would have an opportunity perhaps.
So okay. Quick two-part question then now we're talking about the main event. Cannonier defeats Kelvin Gastelum by unanimous decision in the 5-round main event. So part one, what were your thoughts on Cannonier saying that he's broke? How much of a bad look is that for the UFC? He's the number 3 ranked middleweight in the world. And then second of all, what would you do next if you're Jared Cannonier? Do you try to wait for the Whittaker-Adesanya 2 winner, or do you fight again? If so, who do you fight?
Well, I think one affects the other. If he's really as broke as he says he is, then he's obviously going to have to take another fight before a championship fight.
What did you think? What did you make of him making those comments after the fight? Bad luck for the UFC, right?
Are these comments shocking to anyone at this point? This is the same song and dance we've been here. I've been watching the UFC for a very, very long time, long enough to remember that I believe Nick Diaz, Randy Couture, and BJ Penn all left the UFC over pay disputes in the very early days, as did I think Frank Shamrock.
Well, hold on. Am I shocked that the number 3 middleweight in the world just headlined and won a main event and then says he's broke on the mic? Yeah, a little bit.
This is a general conversation that's been going on for nonstop for a long time. So, no, I just think it's another example of what we all know. I'm not shocked any time a fighter says that they're broke. We hear this literally every single weekend. What is shocking about it?
I guess the fact that Jared because name another fighter, Fight Geek, who said that they're broke after winning a main event. How about that?
Well, maybe there's a caveat there, but, Miesha Tate just came out and said she didn't make any money, and Miesha Tate's a much bigger draw than Jared Cannonier.
She kind of clarified that, didn't she? She went on to say, I spent a lot of money.
I think her general point is that none of them are making enough money, which is the general sentiment across the board, unless you're literally Conor McGregor.
Yeah, okay, absolutely.
Even we just saw Cheyenne buys. We've seen so many people complain about pay, have we not?
Yeah, we have.
That is... If there's one constant in the UFC, it's that fighters have been complaining about pay since, Randy Couture was the heavyweight or the light heavyweight champ.
Okay, but if there's one thing I know about the pay discussion, it's this. The pay discussion is boring, it's over, and if anyone is going to help the fighters, it can only be the fighters themselves. The public and the press cannot help. They'll have to form a union or not.
There certainly need to restructure how it works. The fighters only have the representation of their management, and at this point, it seems like some of the managers actually work for the UFC. So
some?
I'm not.
You mean all?
So at this point, it's almost like the UFC is controlling the pay through the managers who controls the fighters. So
it's almost it's exactly what's happening.
Yeah, so it's definitely a broken system, and until, I off the top of my head, I don't know how many fighters the UFC has. I think it's like 350 or something. I don't know what percentage it would take to get a union started, but you would need a lot of them.
Yeah. Really quick, I want to fly through this. This was one of those cards that did not have a lot of name value on it besides the main event, but did end up delivering in terms of exciting finishes. We don't have
violence. Some of the most brutal, violent submissions you'll ever see. Limp bodies.
So really quick, I did want to cover Alexander Pantoja defeating Brandon Royval via rear naked choke at 146 of round number 2. Dana White said that Pantoja will take on Brandon Moreno for the belt. Here's what's interesting: Pantoja not only has a 1-0 record against Moreno, but arguably 2-0, as they also fought on Tough and Alexander won. So what do you make of that?
Yeah, unofficially, it's for sure 2-0.
Not according to their official record, Fight Geek.
No, I understand, but those two guys have been in the cage together twice, and both
Okay.
of them understand the outcome. So it's 0-2. Yeah, definitely 0-2, which makes the narrative incredibly interesting, and to me, I'm sure to everyone else. I don't think we've seen a fighter improve the way that Moreno has improved in a very long time. Almost like, I guess you could say his improvement was almost like Max Holloway-ish. Max Holloway, to me, it was, gradually improving, and then all of a sudden turned into, a dominant champion, like before you could really blink.
Yep.
Yeah, so it's interesting because a guy, they say styles make fights, but has Moreno improved enough to not fall victim again to a guy in Pantoja who I think has 29, fights under his belt, extremely high win percentage, unbelievable on the mat, so just a really gritty vet. So it's a great fight.
Who you got? Who you got in that now that you built it up so much?
I mean,
we got to move on soon, but yeah.
I mean, every time I pick against Pantoja, he wins, but I just can't pick against Moreno. One of my favorite fighters on the roster, and that improvement, I think that the way he handled Davison Figueiredo proved to me that he wasn't just a good story. He's an elite fighter, a super elite fighter, and I think he will edge Pantoja.
Okay, I love it. I love it. All right, are we ready to move on to our preview and picks for?
Can we just? Last week I made a case for Vince Pichel versus Austin Hubbard, and you said why was it a good fight, and I kind of stumbled around, but I thought it turned out to be a pretty darn good fight. No?
Wow, look at that! Look at the passive aggressive bragging of Fikey, trying to cover that up. Oh, I thought it turned out to be pretty good. Yeah, that was fight of the night, Fikey. Thanks a lot. Oh, thanks for the little humble brag, bro.
Yeah, I got to count my dubs here and there.
All right, yeah.
But we can't move off of the spinning, or what was the spinning back kick of Roosevelt Roberts that dropped him at the end of the third round?
You're talking about Ignacio Bajamendes.
Yes, I am, but I was going to let you pronounce it. So
wheel kicked Roosevelt Roberts into the next dimension.
Yeah, Roosevelt Roberts probably won't ever be the same dude after that one. That was absolutely brutal. He was extremely fatigued at that point.
Only 5 seconds left in the fight.
Well, yeah, he had just, staved off, an attack, and it looked like he was just kind of completely winded, hands down, thought that they were just going to ride out the last 5 seconds and just served it up on an absolute platter. That was brutality, man. That was insane.
I totally agree.
Do you think that's a top 5 finalist at KO of the year?
Yes. Okay, top 5? Yes.
Yeah, for sure. And then, another name, the guy who's kicked off the card with the submission. What's his name? Ramiz
Brahimaj.
There you go. That was impressive, no?
Yes, absolutely. Getting the RNC, the rear naked choke, against Palatnikov at 2:33 of round number 1. Thought he looked great. He's an interesting welterweight contender. Let's see what happens, going forward.
Absolutely. And another one I wanted to call out because my mind was just blown is Nunes versus Malecki.
Josiane Nunes knocking out Bea Malecki at 4 minutes and 54 seconds of round number 1 with the overhand left. Bea Malecki she's like the James Vick of women with even worse distance control.
She just got marched down and just got beaten.
And she was so tall. She had such an advantage. She's just getting marched down.
She comes from a striking background too, so that's why it's not good. It's interesting that she couldn't control the distance and get away from Nunes at all. Was super impressed. I thought that was the easiest call on the card, and boy, was I wrong.
Yeah, okay, so let me ask you this just while we're on it. What do you do with Bea Malecki after this? Because, from a third, just as a third perspective, where I don't have a dog in this race, I look at that fight and I think, get Bea Malecki out of Ultimate Fighting Championship. She's got to go. She's so tall and she looked horrendous. Is that too harsh?
It is. She did look bad, but she does have a win.
She looked horrible. Horrendous.
She has a win over Veronica Macedo, who we've seen in the UFC and has a win in the UFC. So, it's not that she's not quite, at that level, but yeah, I don't know. she's only 2-2 now, right? Or 2-1?
2-1.
I'm never a big fan of someone who only has 2 MMA pro fights being in the UFC. I think that's just a recipe for destruction. But that's just me. Unless you're Brock Lesnar, I'd prefer you have a little regional experience in the fights.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, I don't know. You're gonna have to put her in there with someone who's, yeah, I'm super light punching, I guess.
Okay, last thing before we move ahead. Brian Boom Boom Kelleher called out Sugar Sean O'Malley, I thought, in hilarious fashion after his unanimous decision victory over Domingo Pilarte, but I don't think Sean O'Malley is going to take that fight, so I don't feel like we need to cover it much, right?
Yeah, I don't think he'll take the fight, even though, I mean, he'd have a lot of, stylistic advantages with his size and reach. I think that's a great fight for both guys, but yeah, I don't think, actually, I'm not sure that he won't take that fight. I mean, I think that O'Malley probably thinks he could knock out Kelleher. So yeah, I actually am high on that matchup. I think it may happen.
No, but Kelleher isn't ranked, Fight Geek, and I think that
I understand, but didn't Sean O'Malley just come out and make controversial comments saying he'd prefer to fight guys who are unranked because he gets paid the same?
Well,
anyways?
I kind of thought he was at least semi-trolling.
Well, I'm sure he was semi-trolling, but I think Brian Boom Kelleher, who, albeit not ranked, he's the self-proclaimed best rapper in MMA. He's had some signature performances. He's a well-known personality. I think that bodes well for him in a fight versus someone like Sean O'Malley, because you get 2 fun personalities that makes people really invested in that matchup, and Sean will know that.
Okay, all right. So people are probably annoyed with us. It's definitely time to move on to our preview and picks for UFC Fight Night 35, UFC Vegas 35, Barboza versus Chikadze. And Fight Geek, let me start off with this fight on the main card. We've got 18-6 Kevin Lee taking on the 15-2 Daniel Rodriguez on the main card. Who you got on that one?
Yeah, I'm excited for this one. It's going to be a fun fight. Definitely has fight of the night potential, but definitely going to roll with Kevin Lee here. Kevin Lee's 28 years old, coming into his prime. I think he's definitely fought the tougher competition, has more paths to victory. So yeah, I'm taking Kevin Lee here. That's not to say that Rodriguez isn't alive. I'm sure he has passed the, especially on the feet. I think he has passed the victory, but I'm expecting to see a sharp Kevin Lee. He's been out a little while. At 28 years old, this is about time for him to start coming of age. He took a lot of losses, from 23 to 25, right when he was a young developing fighter. Now it's kind of time to put it all together. So Kevin Lee here via unanimous decision, 3-rounder.
All right. Yeah. I love Kevin Lee. Kind of always have. He gets a lot of hate. I think he's an extremely talented fighter, an extremely talented promoter and trash talker. He's got that it factor. I think all he's really missing, frankly, the only gift I've ever thought he was missing was serious weapons in his hands. We know he's got it in his legs, right? The Gregor Gillespie knockout. We know he's got submissions. We know he's got wrestling. To me, what he's missing a little bit is that finishing power in the hands. But I've got him beating Daniel Rodriguez. I agree with Fight Geek. I've got him beating Rodriguez via unanimous decision. For those who don't know, Daniel Rodriguez is an extremely dangerous striker, a very tough matchup for Kevin, but I think Kevin's going to overcome it, get that unanimous decision. And that's.
Kevin's really athletic. So, Kevin is a guy. I think he'll be able to get in there, pin him up against the fence, get him to the ground. There may even be a submission play there. So, I definitely think Kevin's going to be, the athlete in there and be able to close the distance and keep the fight where he's comfortable and not just get picked apart on the feet.
Absolutely. And then the next fight is the first of 2 tough finales. First for the 135 tough title, and that's Ricky T versus Brady Heist. Wondering who you've got on that one.
I got Ricky here. Was a fan of Ricky on the show. Tough guy. I think he edges this one out.
I've also got Ricky by unanimous decision. So
Awesome.
finally, the final of the 185 tournament. Brian Battle versus Gilbert Urbina. Quickly, Gilbert actually lost the semifinal. Unfortunately, the finalist who beat him did get an injury, but I've been told that he will still get an opportunity with the UFC, which is great to hear. But yeah, we've got 185 tough finale of Brian Battle, who's 5-1, versus Gilbert Urbina, who is 6-1. Really quick, I'll go first here since you took the last one. I've got Brian Battle by third round TKO, but I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I'm definitely rolling with Brian Battle too. Was a fan of him on the show. I think you can see clearly the potential he has with his size and frame and kind of, being a willing student of the game. So, yeah, I think it's Brian Battle, and I'm excited to see where he goes from here. But, Gilbert Urbina is a tough guy, so, we'll have to see. But, yeah, leaning Brian Battle for sure.
Absolutely. And now it's on to the main event. We've got Edson Barboza versus Giga Chikadze. And why don't you start us off, Fight Geek? Who you got and how?
This should be fun. I just think that everything Giga does, that Edson, has done at a higher level in MMA and versus tougher opponents. And I think, we're going to see a back-and-forth fight, but I do think Edson will edge it via, I'll say split decision because it's going to be back and forth. But, yeah, I think Edson Barboza is the kind of striker that's going to be able to, be comfortable versus Chikadze and not fall into, his traps that some of the lesser strikers have. And I think this is, considering all the guys Giga could have fought, this is probably one of the toughest matchups for him because he's going to meet a guy who, does what he does, but has done it versus the elite of the elite in MMA. So Edson Barboza via split decision in a great back-and-forth striking match.
Absolutely. Agree with a lot, if not most of what you just said. I think Barboza versus Chikadze is an amazing main event. Giga's been loud. He's been proud. He's been making a lot of noise. So this is put up or shut up time for him. I'm very excited that he's getting this opportunity. But I'm going to have to go with Edson Barboza, who's just proven to be an absolute monster at 145. I've been so impressed. He reminds me a little bit with him going down to what Jose Aldo's doing at bantamweight, right? They both just look shockingly great going down a bit. And I've got Barboza winning this by, ready? 4th round TKO.
Wow. Cool. Well, let's call out a couple more. The Gerald Meerschaert versus Muradov fight. You got someone in this one?
Yeah, I've got Muradov via unanimous decision.
I've got Muradov via stoppage here. This guy is one to watch for sure. Very athletic. Hits super hard. All right, let's go on to Abdul Razak Al Hassan versus Alessio de Kiriko. This is another banger.
I got Alessio de Kiriko via 2nd round stoppage.
I as well have de Kiriko. I think it'll be a little too technical, but obviously Al Hassan has big power. Let's just keep it moving. Sam Alvey versus Wellington Turman.
We doing all these? Okay, Sam Alvey. It feels like Sam Alvey fights every other weekend. He's in our little competition picks group, and it's like, how are you even making picks? You're fighting every weekend, bro. He's fighting Wellington Turman. I remember that guy. I mean, it's kind of a...
Make a pick.
It's not a good fight. I don't know why you're asking me this.
What do you mean? It's a fun
No one cares about this fight that's our listener. But Wellington Turman by unanimous decision. But no one cares. I don't know. We can't go down the whole card. We can't go down the whole card.
One more. Dustin Jacoby versus Darren Stewart, the dentist.
Darren Stewart, the dentist. I've got him.
Dustin Jacoby, easy.
Wow, you're wrong. All right, that you're wrong on.
No way.
Oh, wait, it's Dustin at 205,
Jacoby.
huh?
Come on.
Darren Stewart moved up to 205. All right, you might be right. Okay, moving on. Okay, in any case, guys, with that, we're not ready for the break quite yet. We almost forgot about the section that Fight Geek begged me to talk about.
Your dream fight. We almost forgot.
Tyron Woodley versus Jake Paul, the boxing match. So Fight Geek.
What do you want me to say about it?
why don't you start off with your formal prediction for this match?
I don't even want to make a formal prediction, but
Just do it. Just do it. You want me to go first?
I'll say Jake Paul 5 rounds to 3.
Wow, you're a traitor. You're a traitor?
I mean,
you're picking Jake Paul. All right, I got Jake Paul as well by 6-round TKO.
I mean, I don't even want to. Okay, we did it. Can we keep it moving?
Yeah, we can. We better before everyone.
You don't want any technical breakdown.
Before everyone stops listening. All right, guys, we'll be right back with listener questions and more. Hey guys, it's Phil the MMA Dude letting you know that this episode of the Split Decision Podcast is brought to you by TotalAggressionClothing.com. Visit www.TotalAggressionClothing.com and use the promo code 46210 to receive a special Split Podcast discount on all Total Aggression hats, shirts, hoodies, and more. Again, that's www.TotalAggressionClothing.com with promo code 46210. Hey guys, it's Phil the MMA Dude back with the Split Decision Podcast, episode number 111, and it is now time for my favorite section of all, and that is Loosen the Questions!
All right, let's
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. I
You're
appreciate it.
very welcome.
Yeah. All right, so we have now got some listener questions. So let me start it off with this question from our man, Zan Bando. That's at Zan Bando 99, a true Split Podcast OG. He says, hey guys, welcome back. 2 questions as per usual. Number 1, what's the more intriguing card? Paul Woodley or UFC Vegas 35? Number 2, which fight or fights are you most looking forward to in the month of September? Hashtag AskSplitPod. So Fight Geek number 1, what's the more intriguing card? I know you're going to say Paul Woodley is more intriguing than Vegas 35, right?
Absolutely not. I think Kevin Lee is the most. I think Kevin Lee's the most intriguing fighter fighting this weekend where he's at in his career. So Kevin Lee, and then I think Giga Chikadze versus Barboza is the second most intriguing match of the weekend. So definitely UFC Vegas 35.
Okay, but okay, that's all fair. And then so I will have to choose UFC Vegas 35, although full disclosure everyone, I am excited by Woodley Paul. I think part of that is because I'm a big Tyron
What do you
Woodley
mean excited? Like
well,
excited
I'm a big Tyron Woodley fan, as you know. I've been very loyal to him.
You're just excited you get to drink on Sunday. Don't lie.
Mom, that is not true. And it's disgusting.
What's
Drinking
that
on
pay-per-view?
Sunday?
Yeah, it is. The pay-per-view's on Sunday.
Oh, yeah. All right, I'll be drinking. I mean, I'm just... Okay, moving on.
Imagine watching Paul Woodley and not having a drink.
That's true. Okay, but what am I most looking... Which fights am I most looking forward to in the month of September? Well, all right, I'll give one that's not been named. Hamzat Chimaev versus Li the Leech Jingliang.
That's awesome. But I mean, for me, September is Nick Diaz month. Everything else is a far, far number 2.
Nick Diaz versus Robbie Lawler. Ortega versus Volkanovski.
That is a great fight. But I mean, Nick Diaz's return is like this myth that a lot of people never thought was going to happen. So the fact that he's actually going to return in the modern era of the UFC is just, it's a little mind-blowing.
Imagine if he sleeps Robbie Lawler. He won't, but
I doubt it. If anything,
yeah, no, I know.
He'll drag Robbie into later, or actually, it's only a 3-rounder, right?
No, it's 5.
Awesome. So yes, I think he drags Robbie into deep waters with the cardio, and then from there it gets interesting because we know that Nick Diaz has one of the greatest chins to ever compete in MMA. So is that chin still there? Because if it is, Robbie's going to have a hell of a time.
Dude, I'll be so impressed if Nick Diaz is able to get a knockout of Robbie Lawler after this many years.
I don't think he'll get a knockout. I think a submission or a decision are much more likely. But again, who knows? at this point.
Right, absolutely.
But we do know that it's not going to be two prime guys, so to temper your enthusiasm, but I still think that, it's going to be very, very interesting for a, Diaz stand.
I agree. Okay, this next question comes from Mixtaman. Guys, give him a follow. That's at MICKSTAMAN at Mixtaman. Love this guy. He says, howdy, fellas. What's the ceiling for Giga? How do you see him coming out of this weekend's event? And if he wins, what's next? #AskSplitPod.
I like this one.
Yeah, this is a great question. So, I think we partly answered this. I don't think either of us see him winning, but let's say he does win. Let's say Giga does beat Barboza, Fight Geek. What would be next for him in that case? Because Barboza's number 9.
Let's start with this ceiling. I think it's kind of ironic that Giga's ceiling is probably what Barboza's ceiling was as a fighter. I think that probably getting to the top 5, maybe 4, but then, meeting the more well-rounded guys that have been grappling for their whole lives and whatnot, I think he's going to stall out. Do not think he'll win a title. So I think he's a lot like Edson Barboza as far as the ceiling goes.
Yeah. I actually think I was going to say I thought you were going to say I think it's ironic that we're talking about his ceiling on the eve of when we're about to find his ceiling. Because
yeah, exactly. Well, I don't know about that because I don't think that what is Barboza ranked?
Barboza's ranked 9, Giga's ranked 10. But I'll tell you.
So this doesn't prove that what his ceiling is.
Well, let me tell you who's in front. 8, Dan Ige. 7, Josh Emmett. 6, Arnold Allen. 5, Calvin Cater. 4, Korean Zombie. 3, Yair Rodriguez. 2, Brian Ortega. 1, Max Holloway. Is he really going to beat anyone?
I think him versus Josh Emmett is incredibly intriguing if he wins because Emmett's a power puncher with a great wrestling pedigree.
Well, okay, all right, but you get what I'm saying. He's more or less around his age.
I think his ceiling is probably to be a top 4 or 5 guy in the division, but then he'll stall with the championship level guys.
Okay.
I think exactly like we've seen from Edson Barboza, who will give you some of the greatest highlight reel knockouts and good wins, but when he gets to the Khabibs and the Tony Fergusons of the world, he's not going to pull those ones out because they're, just a little more well-versed in the whole game, the totality of MMA.
Yeah. Okay. I agree with that.
It's very interesting, but at 145, him versus Yair Rodriguez would be fun someday. I think him and Yair probably have similar ceilings.
Well, we're about to see Holloway versus Rodriguez, I believe, in November.
Yeah, could you imagine if Yair just accidentally flash knocked out Max Holloway, how the world would turn on its axis?
I'd be pissed. Don't say that.
It's what makes the fight intriguing. I think Max wins everywhere except, a tornado kick to the temple.
Yep.
All right. Anyways, that'll be awesome.
Okay, so next question comes from our main man and Split Podcast OG Eduardo. That's at Landa Crew. He says, with this week being the 4-year anniversary of the McGregor-Mayweather fight, do you believe that this was the catalyst for McGregor's current downfall in MMA? #AskSplitPod.
100%. That in the UFC.
I think definitely.
The UFC acquiescing to every single one of his demands when he was, still a growing fighter. Those are the two things. But yes, I think him making all that money, being basically on a world stage, I don't see how that wasn't kind of the turning point in the way he viewed success. I think before that he viewed success as being the best fighter in the world. After that he viewed success as being the richest fighter in the world.
Yeah. I'll be honest. Back when me and Fight Geek were first trying to make this show, and the 6 months even before, we were kind of discussing our love for MMA, and that was a passion we had together, and we used to like McGregor.
I loved McGregor all the way up until.
So did I.
Up until the Floyd even the Maymack.
No, I rooted for him on Maymack. I actually rooted for him.
100%.
I even rooted for him against Khabib. It was.
Honestly,
it was immediately after. He did damage up during the Khabib lead up, and then after that.
I've said this many times. Fighters losing is not what makes me stop.
No, not at all. Conor did this with himself
Well, yeah, it's
completely
outside
separate
the
from
cage
losing.
stuff that I just am not a huge fan of. So I started, just genuinely not being as intrigued by Conor or, feeling the urge to root for him, from probably the fourth press conference on. And then it just has kind of deteriorated from then based on, we've seen so much with him now. He's been arrested multiple times. He threw the dolly at the bus. He hit the old man. There's been all kinds of crazy allegations. And that's the stuff that makes, people take shots at Conor. He's basically, what is he, 22-6 now? He's still an elite fighter that's had a couple stumbles versus some of the greatest guys who have ever graced the octagon. So, context is always important.
Yeah, but for the record, I do agree with Eduardo that the catalyst for McGregor's current downfall was absolutely getting into the boxing ring with Floyd Mayweather.
100%. That was you stopping me from babbling. I appreciate it.
Here's what's interesting. Before we move on, Fight Geek, would McGregor versus Khabib would it have looked different had Conor never left the UFC? And that just been his next fight? We'll never know.
I think he probably would have looked different, for sure. But, my real question is, would Conor have ever beaten RDA at 155 when they were scheduled to fight? Would he have ever become the champ? Because still to this day, I don't think that's a great matchup for Conor.
I think he would have at that time. Now,
I think he would have at that time because of, how...
If you're asking me what happens today, that's a whole different answer.
Yeah, but either way, that was a very tough fight that Conor kind of missed because I think even though Eddie's a legend, I think Eddie's style was tailor-made for Conor.
Eddie also had a complete panic attack, stylistic. Well, he
it was like stage fright or something. It was not good. But I don't know. We got off track there. But definitely think the Maymax stuff was the beginning of Conor's kind of mindset changing.
Yeah. Okay, so this question comes from one of my favorite listeners. It's such a great question. This is from Jalen Ware. That's at strive2b_great GR and then the number 8. And we've sort of touched on this, but let me ask a question. He says, Kevin Lee, once a surefire top contender, dominates everyone, then seems to always lose that one key fight that would make him a top contender. What is he missing upstairs, or what technique-wise, in your opinion, with all of the elite skill set, is he missing? #AskSplitPod. So I think I slightly answered this by accident earlier, Fikey, when I said his hands are what's missing, right? Power in his hands.
I think that's even going a bit too far. For Kevin Lee, it's just time. He was so young. If you just look at the progression of his career, he went from fighting, Jake Matthews to Trinaldo to Chiesa, and then from Chiesa he jumps to a prime Tony Ferguson, a prime Barboza, Al Iaquinta, Rafael Dos Anjos, Gregor Gillespie, Charles Oliveira. He's only 28 years old. If you would have went back and looked at what Charles Oliveira was like at 28 years old, which was 3 years ago, people would have said, what does he need to do to get over the hump?
Well, Charles is a particularly bad head case, but yes, you're right.
What I'm saying is, when you're judging a guy in a vacuum from 25 to 28, I don't think you can put any set labels on them, especially if they're full-time fighters and developing. I think that Kevin Lee's self-confidence and, kind of desire to be the best at a young age got him into a lot of crazy tough fights at 24, 25, 26 years old, and he took a few losses. I don't think there's a bad loss on his record. I think that he's learned from each time, and I think it's just time. Can you imagine in 4 years from now, if he keeps this up, potentially 32 years old, some of these other guys have aged out of their prime, and he's just hitting like his super prime where guys like, Charles Oliveira are in right now? I think that he's still, it's kind of hard to believe that he's 28. I know I keep saying it. It's kind of shocking that he's fought the guys he's fought and had the performances he's had this young. And I think it's only a matter of time. I still see Kevin Lee as a guy at 155 and 170 that within the next 5 years will certainly be a player in the top 5. if not the top 3 again.
You know who's had a similar trajectory in terms of how young they are, how they were kind of rushed along, how they're still talented? You can tell me if you agree or not, but I think Darren Till.
I think that Kevin Lee's handled that better than Darren Till. I mean, Kevin Lee has
big words. Okay.
I think Kevin Lee has, he's got wins over, Gregor Gillespie's a great win. Edson Barboza's a great win. That Michael Chiesa win's a good win. The win over Trinaldo when he was young. The loss he has to Tony Ferguson, there was a while in that fight where, he was threatening. So it's not like he got completely washed by a prime Tony Ferguson. Right. He was in there competing, and I believe he had a staph infection to boot in that fight.
He did, and let's remember, his last loss, it was against this guy named Charlie Olives. I think he's the current lightweight champion of the world.
Yeah. So, I think Kevin Lee, people want to just write the book on the guy and say that, he didn't fulfill his potential as a top prospect, but I think he's right where he's supposed to be, and not everybody can be 21-1 or 24-3. If you get in the modern MMA game and you start taking top 15 fights in the UFC at 23 years old, you're going to have losses. It's very similar to Kelvin Gastelum. Now, let's say he goes on and loses his next 2 fights. Then maybe he's in a Kelvin Gastelum situation where you might need to take a step back because you're 29 years old, you've lost 4 out of 5 or whatever, just throwing out some blanket situations. But right now, his last 2 losses are to former lightweight champions. 3 out of his last 4 losses are to former champions. So, if you're going to lose to the best, and then, he's still got time on his hands. So, long-winded, I think Kevin Lee is exactly where he's supposed to be, and in the next 3 to 5 years will be a big-time player in the division.
Okay, I've got one quick last question from Twitter, and then we'll take it away with the voice questions. But this is from Maji, and that's at J_C. He says, what's your take on Khabib's comments about Jose Aldo, and how do you think their legacies stack up? So for those that don't know, Khabib recently said on, I believe during a press conference, that he thought that, fighters only have one peak. Aldo's definitely already had his, and that he views Aldo as not doing anything particularly impressive of late, that he's just a businessman fighter. Is that accurate, Fight Geek? Did I explain it accurately and fairly?
I don't know Russian, so I'm not quite sure. I think it was all translated, so we may have missed a little bit in there. But, I think more or less that's what he said. And I kind of agree with him on the one peak part, but that doesn't mean you can't make 2, 3, 4 runs where you're streaking, you're performing at your best, and you are matching up well with the current crop of elite talent. So while you may not be in your absolute apex physical peak, you can still have many runs, and I think that's what we're seeing from Jose Aldo, who is using a lifetime of training, technique, experience to, while he's not in his peak, he's still making a run based on, his accumulation of, his life's work, which is mixed martial arts. So I don't know if that helped, but I think there is one peak, but I think there's multiple runs. So I think that maybe Khabib is right there. And as far as Jose Aldo being a money fighter, I don't understand where that comes from at all. I think if someone loves something as deeply as someone like Jose Aldo does, I think Tom Brady's a great example. Tom Brady is still chasing Super Bowls at 43 years old, even though he's had a ton of success and he's probably physically not his best self. But that doesn't mean he can't chase championships and do what he loves as long as possible. And I think that's who Jose Aldo is for the MMA community to a certain extent.
Yeah, hard to disagree with any of that, frankly. I totally agree. I think that Aldo is not just a businessman. I think he's definitely chasing glory. In terms of where do they stack up, Aldo versus Khabib, that's a really tough question for me personally.
That's when you start wondering, how do they stack up legacy wise, as in pound for pound on their best night, or are we looking at the longevity, the strength of schedule?
Aldo has 8. He's got 8 UFC featherweight title defenses and 9 title defenses overall, if you count the WEC one that kind of got converted. Habib obviously has 3, but that is tied for the record at lightweight, so it's so tough.
Yeah, it is tough. I mean, obviously, Jose Aldo's
He's got the longevity on Habib.
the longevity of his resume and having the wins in multiple weight classes. Like, I mean, Jose Aldo's a guy who was extremely young. I mean, you think about, and this is kind of, segueing back to Kevin Lee. If you look at Khabib's record, and now I'm not saying that, his first 14 fights or whatever are absolutely meaningless, but you look at the first, 14 fights of Jose Aldo's career, he's already a world champion in an American promotion versus full-time fighters. And you look at some of Khabib's early opponents and they're 0-0 or 2-0 or 0-3. Or I mean, so it's really hard to, judge them because, their careers don't line up that way. But I would say I'm trying to give a definitive answer on whose legacy is greater. And I think that Jose Aldo's totality, his legacy is greater than Khabib's, although he won't be considered a better fighter at the end of his career.
All right, well, now that you're putting me on the spot and making me choose, I have to go ahead and respectfully disagree with you. I do think that Habib will be viewed as the greater fighter in the GOAT conversation overall when all is said and done. But if Aldo goes ahead and wins that bantamweight title, that changes everything. So we'll see.
Yeah, great question, though.
Yeah, absolutely great question. Okay, so Fikey, do you have any voicemail?
I do, and I have to apologize because MMA by Milliken, one of our show regulars, sent in an UFC rankings questions from a few weeks ago that I missed. So we're going to circle back around and answer that.
Sorry, Milliken. We suck, man. I'm so sorry, bro. Love
it's
Milliken.
Still a relevant question now, so I thought we'd just bring it back up.
Excellent,
so here it is.
Excellent.
MMA by Milliken. All right, so one of the things I really don't like is when a unranked fighter fights a high-ranked fighter, as we saw with TJ Dillashaw versus Corey Sandhagen. The same thing happened over at women's flyweight when Jessica Andrade folded Chukagan over like a lawn chair. Andrade entered into the rankings. It pushed everyone else down because they didn't want to take Chukagan off the rankings. Same with Sandhagen. So everyone gets unfairly pushed down. Do you guys think that's all right? Just business as usual? Or is there a way around that? Like, to me, even if they're unranked, if it's in the lower rankings, cool. Because, you can kick off a 13th ranked or 14th ranked fighter or 15th ranked, as we see in the UFC. What do you guys think about that? Have a good one.
You catch all that?
Absolutely. Milliken, the man. Really appreciate the question, man. So, okay, here's my quick thoughts on that, Fight Geek. So, maybe I'm wrong. My thoughts on that are, I kind of view it as like getting a wild card into a tournament or something like that, where I guess if you're arguing that it's not deserved, that's fine. But then surely the person who doesn't deserve it will be brutally humiliated, right? Now, obviously,
well, my thing is like there's too many caveats there because TJ Dillashaw,
Dillashaw was the champ and he didn't even lose the belt in the cage.
And the fact that he ended up winning that fight, in my opinion, proves that, in certain instances, it's not only, okay to do, but appropriate. I think that, Corey Sandhagen fighting TJ Dillashaw was obviously, he's not ranked, but he's TJ Dillashaw. I mean, he's considered arguably the greatest bantamweight to ever compete in the division.
Again,
so,
it's worth stating, guys, he never lost the belt in the octagon.
No, he did not. But, so, I mean, I think in certain instances it doesn't make a lot of sense to fight backwards. But when you're talking about someone who's coming off, a suspension, for instance, like John Jones, how could you rank John Jones in the heavyweight division? He's going to probably get a title fight without, being ranked in the heavyweight division. They might just throw him up there but it's essentially the same exact thing, is it not?
Yeah, no, it's absolutely the same thing.
So, I mean, you're going to make exceptions for people that, are certain fighters, but, I honestly don't have too much of a problem with, if someone signs the contract and finds it, risk reward good enough to sign the contract, then, it is what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. I do agree, Milliken, that, overall I do agree that I'm not crazy about fighters that are unranked getting really high slots. That's why, for example, I never really.
But who does that unless they're taking a short notice opponent?
Let me give you an example. Back in the day, Hamzat Chimaev was unranked and he got a fight against number 3 Leon Edwards. And while I was excited for the fight, it didn't sit well with me. I believe I spoke about this at the time, that he was getting such a high-ranked contender.
That's a very good one. I think that I didn't agree with that either. That was a little bizarre. I thought it was too much of a jump. But, again, there's a big difference between Khamzat Chimaev, who's 3-0 in the UFC, and TJ Dillashaw, who's a multiple-time bantamweight champion, or even Andrade, who Yeah, I believe that was the other one he brought up, right?
Yeah, but again, so that's a good point. But again, Milliken, I would just play devil's advocate and say, well, look what happened in that fight. Andrade folded her like a lawn chair, to use your words, right?
Yep. So I think we've seen that, sometimes the UFC rankings aren't all that accurate based on the results anyway. So
exactly, and I think that's where I think the final answer lies is yes, respect the rankings, but not too much because they're often inaccurate.
Yeah, because we didn't make them.
Right, exactly.
All right, and I got one more question here from Edward.
Edward!
Here it goes.
Hi, Phil and Fight Geek. I hope all is good with you both. Here's my 2 listener questions. You have one shot at breaking the MMA pay-per-view buyer's record. What fight do you make for your main event? There's one rule with this. The fighters have to be from the current roster, so no retired Khabib. Second question. Which fighter has the most inspirational journey to the cage? My choice is Edward Folliang of One Championship, who overcame extreme poverty in the Philippines and extreme family tragedy to become a 1 lightweight world champion. Who's yours?
Great questions.
Such a great question. Thank you, Edward. Wow. Love it.
That's a tough one. I mean, I haven't really didn't put much thought into it.
Well, there's two questions here. So, one, you've got to make a pay-per-view with the current roster to surpass all pay-per-views. 2, who's the most inspirational fighter? Let's start off with question 2. Who's the most inspirational fighter? I'll go first. I have to put Francis Ngannou. I don't know if everyone's listened to the Joe Rogan podcast episode where Francis talks about his experience getting eventually to the UFC, but it's truly heartbreaking and heartwarming, frankly. It's both. And it's a crazy inspirational story about survival. I mean, the stuff that Francis Ngannou went through is mind-numbing and truly breathtaking. So I'd have to put him.
Yeah, I'm going to shout out 2 OGs. Obviously, Matt Brown, the Immortal. I think his story's been well documented over the years. He came back from a rough, prior life to, have a long, legendary MMA career. And Court McGee as well, another guy who overcame
good
addiction.
choice, yeah.
Yeah, he's been in the game a long time, has really changed his life and has become, like a light to a lot of other people. So I have a lot of appreciation for those guys.
Absolutely. Okay, and then the other part of the question, we've got
pay-per-view, huh?
We've got one shot at making a pay-per-view. It's got to surpass the UFC 229 pay-per-view record, which I believe was 1.4? No,
I don't.
No, 2.4. Excuse me, 2.4.
2.4. I'm not sure that a single, main event can pull that.
I know, but for fun, if
it'll need a full card stacked. But yeah, just for fun.
I have my answer, but you want to go first?
Well, go ahead. Let's hear.
Okay. I think, as weird as it sounds, this might not be a popular answer at first, but just hear me out. If you have Dustin Poirier defeating Charles Oliveira, then you wait, you sit Dustin out, and you have him, you make Poirier versus McGregor for the belt. As stupid as it is, I get it. You make it for the belt. You play the trailer where Conor goes, "This is not over!" And I think you can get some buys.
I don't know if you're going to cross over that much. Even
with the angry, "This is not over!"
Yeah, I don't think that that's as exciting to everyone as it may be to you.
Okay, it was very exciting to me, so.
No, I mean, I think unfortunately, there's just a bit of McGregor fatigue. I'm not sure he's going to ever surpass 2.4 million again unless he fights Floyd Mayweather in a UFC cage or something just outlandish like that. I just don't. I think.
Yeah, Floyd ain't agreeing to that shit.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, maybe Dustin Poirier wins the belt and Khabib comes back for 30-0, something like that. Maybe I'm not sure.
Wow, you hate my whole marketing of this is not over.
Well, I think when Conor was still breaking the pay-per-view record every time he fought, there was still the belief that Conor was arguably the most elite fighter in the world, and I think that at least 50% of the fans of the sport understand that Conor's not that guy anymore. So,
but 264 did 1.8 million buys.
Yeah, and he got broke.
Yes, he did, but he said, "This is not all." Okay, everyone's about to turn off the show with me saying that.
You've been practicing that all week because
I've been dying to say it. I've been dying to say it.
I mean, I think that stuff is lame. I think Conor.
It's so lame, but it's fun.
I don't think 2.5 million people are that intrigued by Conor, talking bad about Dustin's wife while he has a broken leg on the ground.
No, he looks ridiculous.
He comes across as a sore loser, which again, I don't see, how he's going to cross over like he once did, because he used to be super charismatic with his wind at his back and people were intrigued by him. Now people kind of feel like they've watched him long enough to now he's gone the heel turn and just, you know what I mean? That's not for everybody. So
the only thing I'd like to say is I've got a marketing idea, product. I just want a button whenever anyone is feeling. You
just want to say that phrase.
Whenever anyone's feeling down, they're not feeling up, they don't think they can do something, they just press the button and it just goes, "This is not over." All right, I'm done. I've lost the whole audience.
I'm not. You think Conor McGregor versus Dustin Poirier 14 is going to break the record? All of a sudden, Dustin Poirier and Conor McGregor turned into the Fast and Furious series somehow.
No, honestly, I think
they'll be like Conor is down 1-5, but this isn't over.
Have you seen the video? Have you seen that comedic video where Conor's? You haven't seen the video where Conor's like, "This ain't over, Dustin. I'll see you in the fourth," and then like he's in a wheelchair and now he's like kind of like shaking and he's like, "This ain't over. See you in the fifth." And then he's like, and then he can't even move and he's in a hospital bed and he's like, "This ain't over. See you in the sixth."
My thing is like, it's going to be over for Dustin Poirier, though. He's climbed that mountain and beat him twice. I mean, I'm sure Conor wants that fight, but if Dustin's making his money and eventually captures the title, who's to say he just won't retire similar to Khabib because he's gotten bored with the challenge of McGregor?
Oh, absolutely.
I think people are like, it's number 4 is going to happen, but I think the cards are in Dustin Poirier's hands, aren't they, somewhat?
Yeah.
He's already not threatened, but mentioned retirement, and that he doesn't even really, love the media portion of the game anymore, which, the media portion is the part that Conor dominates.
Although if I'm Dustin, I'm definitely thinking very seriously about entertaining a fourth fight. Why? Well, because money and Conor's not a threat, and
I know. I'm just saying that people think Conor's calling the shots there now. I think it's going to be up to Dustin if he wants to do that again, right?
Absolutely.
So,
Okay,
or maybe
all right.
Conor will just get a shot at Kamaru Usman in his comeback fight.
He's trying. I kind of want it to happen because I'm being evil.
I just don't understand how.
The evil part of me wants it, to be honest. Just let it happen.
That'll never happen. That would be Ali's dream if he could get Conor in there versus Usman.
As Rashad Evans said during Tough when he was confronted by Rampage Jackson, just let it happen. Just let it happen.
Just let it happen.
It was one of the most cold lines at the time, though. Super badass. Because Rampage totally wussed out.
He was a smooth talker back then.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, before we get out of here, I wanted to make sure you did see Kayla Harrison go 66 strikes to 0 in her win in PFL last week, right?
Yeah, I did. I was disappointed.
You're still not a believer?
No, I mean, I'm sure she'd beat every mother at the PTA meeting.
All the soccer moms.
She'd be the PTA champion for 20 years running.
So you don't think that, in the next year she can get down to 145 and come over to the UFC and dominate the 6 fighters that are in that division, or 4 fighters?
Oh, she can get down to 145 and she can come over to the UFC, and then she'll learn what real fighting is.
Oh, yeah. You think Felicia Spencer's going to teach her?
You joke about that. Actually, I'd love to see Kayla Harrison versus Felicia Spencer.
I think that would be the fight right there.
You just got me excited about like the money fight. Actually, that's the fight. That's the fight.
I think that
that's the fight right there. Felicia Spencer.
Kayla Harrison brutalizes Felicia over time.
You'd be surprised. I think you'd be surprised.
I think you'd be surprised at how physically powerful Kayla Harrison is.
I feel like Joe Rogan with the Brendan Schaub thing. I think you'd be surprised.
I think you'd be surprised. I think you'd be surprised, Phil.
All right.
Hold on. I want to keep talking. Do we got to be done?
No, we got extra time.
Did Megan Anderson get let go, or is she still on the UFC roster?
Megan was fired long ago.
Yeah, I figured. But who would you have taken at 145, her or Kayla Harrison?
Honestly, Kayla, but I don't have a lot of. That doesn't mean much. I don't got too much respect for Megan.
Placed her as the number 3 ranked featherweight in the world in the UFC.
Sorry?
I said right there, she's already the number 3 ranked featherweight in the world in the UFC.
I mean, yeah. I mean, look, I can say this. I would like Kayla over the 45ers besides Nunes, Spencer. I'm trying. I mean, Norma Dumont is coming to mind, but I think I'd favor Kayla.
What about Jermaine Durandamy?
Yeah, that's a good, and that's I think
Jermaine would be too much for her right now.
I agree. Actually, why doesn't Jermaine hang out at 145 more? She should. Oh, because I know why. Because she's down 0-2 to Nunes.
No, because didn't she have the belt and vacate it?
I mean, yeah.
So the UFC probably told her that her opportunities to be the champion in that division are probably non-existent again. So
I forgot about that because literally no one remembers it, but yes.
Right. So the UFC is probably like, you're 135er now. And she's like, but I'm the number 1 contender. And they're like, no, you're 135er now.
Yeah, I mean, at least she didn't Nico Montano the whole thing.
Well, that's very true. And I think GDR's redeemed herself to a certain extent. She's had some great performances.
She absolutely has.
And she's a nice person. All right.
Okay. With that, everyone, thank you so much for listening. Fight Geek, take us away, baby.
All right. As usual, you can find us on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Google Play, Stitcher, and more. I'm at The Fight Geek MMA. He's at Phil, the MMA Dude. We are at Split_Podcast. It's 4 words. The Split Decision Podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Talk to you next week. Peace.
Peace.